For joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the Disability Justice Network of Ontario is located in so-called Hamilton, Ontario, the territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This agreement dictates that we have a duty to share the space with one another and to treat this land with the love and care it deserves. It also dictates that we all share the same spoon and have the responsibility to make sure that those around us have everything they need. Disability justice as a framework would not exist without the centering of Indigenous sovereignty. It is important to note as settlers on this land that colonization has and continues to strip away the rights of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous disabled peoples. Forced sterilization, the racist medical industrial complex, and our prison systems have all been built to vanquish Indigenous peoples' rights to this land and of their rights to their own bodies. We are gathering here in this digital space together because we understand that anti-Blackness, anti-Indigenous racism, colonialism, and ableism are all connected. When we envision futures for Black people, futures where we are free, it is just as important for us to imagine a future where Indigenous people are free and rights to their land are not only acknowledged, but supported. We believe that in order to achieve Black liberation and win in the fight against white supremacy, we must also fight for the independence and sovereignty of Indigenous people and continue to resist ongoing colonialism. We are gathering tonight from all across Turtle Island, and as we do so, we are reminded about our commitment to fight together for Indigenous resurgence, Black liberation, and freedom. And so just a few housekeeping rules. If folks who are entering the Zoom room, if you could keep your videos off and your mics muted, that way we can make sure we can hear our panelists better. And so just to introduce you to why we're gathering together and give you a little bit of context for the conversation, Afrofuturism is a movement that incorporates science, technology, and fantasy. It is generally used to refer to literature, music, and visual art that explore the relationship between the African diaspora, slavery, anti-Blackness, and futures where Black people can truly be free. Here at the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, we see the connection between Afrofuturism, abolition, and disability justice as these movements are connected, as these movements also share the same dream and vision that we understand and absolutely believe that a better, more just world and future is out there, and it is possible. One where our governments aren't actively trying to kill us or coerce us into dying. A future where Black love and joy is celebrated, not reprimanded. One where our disabilities are radically accepted and celebrated. One where police and prisons don't exist or get in the way of keeping ourselves and each other safe. Afrofuturism, as a creative practice, allows us to form futures that value the lives and contributions of people from the African and Black diaspora instead of the racist violence that we have seen for centuries. Mark Deary's seminal essays on Afrofuturism, Black to the Future, asks, can a community whose past has been deliberately rubbed out and whose energies have been subsequently been consumed by the search for the legible traces of its history, imagine possible futures? The Disability Justice Network of Ontario aims to build a just and accessible Ontario wherein people with disabilities are free to be liberated. As the Disability Justice Network of Ontario continues to create an inclusive future, we would like to bring forward a discussion on prioritizing the empowerment of Black disabled artists within racist and ableist institutions. And so here to share their experiences with Afrofuturism and disability justice is Alsa St. We have Peter Owusu-Ansah, and we also have Clairandean Humphrey. We're also joined with Evelina Kokoke. And just to give you a little bit more background on our panelists, Alsa St. is a 24-year-old visual artist from Toronto, starting a Bachelor of Fine Arts at York University in September of 2021 for visual arts. Her art style consists of a mix of contemporary art and realism, with a main medium focus on pencils and watercolors. Alsa started painting as a child as a means to cope with emotional instability and express emotions. She has so far pursued art recreationally, but is hoping to gain mastery and turn profitable. She believes art is an important part of life and expression, and it's sad it's not taken seriously as something someone should make a career out of. Peter Owusu-Ansah is a Toronto-based visual artist who specializes in pop art. Peter experiences and explores the beauty of pop art and the universe while being deaf. Some of his captivating works were included in the exhibitions such as Flourishing, Somehow We Stay Attuned at the Tangled Art Gallery. He is well known to use his art to express the deep lengths of communication through art and colors. We have Clairandean Humphrey. Clairandean Humphrey is a queer artist, tarot reader, and movement instructor. They released a lo-fi EP in 2020 entitled Moving in the Dark. Working from a developing trauma-informed framework and a developing gender-inclusive framework to facilitate accessibility, personal agency, and self-compassion in a movement practice. They are currently working on another EP and making art videos. You can keep updated with them and their work on Instagram at Clarity Tarot. And we're also joined by Evelina Kokoke. Evelina Kokoke is a queer Black mixed activist and poet from Hamilton, Ontario. She is an MFA candidate in poetry at the University of Guelph. Her writing has begun featured in books Hugs Across Writing Across Canada, an anthology of emerging writers, as well as in Tenderness Slit, voicemail poems, Pineapples Against the Patriarchy, and the Undergraduate Review and Collective Reflections. Thank you for joining us. And Nathalia, if you would like to get into the questions.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Athalia. I'll just be just relaying the questions back and forth to everyone. How we can make it go smoother is if you want, you can like sort of raise your hand before you're about to answer the question, just so we don't have anyone talking over anyone. But if that works with everyone, I guess we can all start. The first question that I have is, what does your art practice currently look like? And what are some elements that have inspired you? Yeah, also you can start it off.
I can start. So currently my art practice is more of a recreational thing, as I have been doing a bachelor's in psychology, but I hope on making it more into a career, which hasn't been an opportunity that I've had in the past. As was said before, my main mediums are usually watercolor and pencil, but I'm hoping to start a BFA at York and get more skills and knowledge on how to expand into other mediums, and hopefully within the next few months can start selling prints of my work.
That's nice. Thanks, Elsa. Do you find um, like how do you find the process of like going towards your VA and going towards trying to find prints for your to sell? Like, do you find that process being easy, or do you find it difficult? And like, how would it be difficult?
Well, personally, I found that the biggest struggle has been the financial aspect of moving towards having art as my sole income because I did not grow up with a lot of money, so I had to look towards things that were more accessible and made it easier to pay bills and pay for my school. There's this one funding that's actually happening right now for Black artists that I came across online called Pivot, and they gave scholarships to Black artists who are trying to start their art practices. So I'm hoping that can come through because art supplies are quite expensive, and people don't recognize that art actually takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to produce. So it's not realistic for everyone to pursue that as a career, even if it is what they're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's like really interesting. I'm wondering if anyone else would want to jump in to also talk about their art and like what it looks like and what that journey looks like for some of the elements that have been inspired by you guys.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute. I'll go then. Hi, so I'm Evelyna, and as you already know from the introduction, I'm a poet primarily, although I have a little bit of background in visual art as well. My parents are both creative people in the arts. Like my mom is a painter and a writer, and my dad writes. So I think that was a big source of like why I started writing. In terms of elements that inspire my art practice, well, my current manuscript, which is my thesis project, is called I Want to Be Good. And it's about essentially what it means to be a good person, both individually and politically in our current moment. And for me, like it ties in a lot with my activism, because I think that a lot of the activists I know are very concerned with being good as like a stable kind of identity. And what I'm sort of getting towards in the book, which also just explores climate change and anti-Black racism and capitalism and just all the stuff that's messing us up right now. But my main, I think the main takeaway for me as the writer of it is that being good is not something that you can just be. It's not something you can arrive at. It's an ongoing practice. Sorry, my cat's just popped up here. And so I think my work reflects that. Sorry, my cat is biting me now. My girlfriend's gonna get her one second. But yeah, like basically my poetry deals a lot with now and with like how to build a better world from the materials of our present. So that's been a major focus in that. And I think what I arrive at is ultimately that we just need to keep trying and we keep needing to work collectively together and fight, because like the world is sort of, everything rides on us right now. So that, but we just have to fight. It's not enough to just write. We actually have to take what we feel and take that to the streets as well. So that's a big part of what I'm writing about right now. So a lot of it's inspired by actual actions that I've been part of or by conversations with friends and stuff. Anyway, sorry, I rambled a lot. So that's about it.
No, that's great. I think I love how you're inspired by sort of you being politically involved and having sort of your parents as a big inspiration in your life to sort of lean on and guide you through this. I was wondering like how the process has been for like finding works to write for and like things to publish with, and like has that process been easy for you or do you find it very difficult?
I don't know. It hasn't been especially easy. I think that the majority of the time, if I'm going to make money as a poet, it's through slam poetry, not through page poetry, which is unfortunate because I think that is very limiting. Like slam, like, you know, spoken word is a wonderful, wonderful genre. And I owe so much to that genre and to the people who've like been like the precursors in that. But at the same time, slam specifically, where you can go and make money on the stage, you compete, that is very limiting because it is based on saying things that are appealing to others and that affirm people's existing sentiments and perspectives. And so it's very hard to do anything challenging or new because you're being judged and giving points and having points deducted based on how people feel about your work. And depending on who that is, that can be very limiting. So I think, yeah, but I think that's where most of the money of anything exists for racialized writers. It tends to be in slam. And that's a problem. I think there's not enough opportunity to make any kind of money in page poetry. Like you're still, like they were giving you $50 per page in the 70s, and that's still how much you get now, but rent's gone up. Like the cost of like food has gone up. The cost of transportation, like everything's much more expensive. So no, I wouldn't say I've had some publications, as I mentioned in my list there, but I feel like it has been pretty challenging. And like most of the time, if I'm getting money, it's to perform, not to write. So it's about performing my work, which is, it's still part of it, but it's a little frustrating.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if Peter, if you wanted to start talking about, similar question, like what does your art currently look like and the other elements that have inspired you?
Art has been with me since I was a child. When I moved to Canada at the age of 15 in 1995, I didn't know art was a thing. So what I was focused on was learning English and trying to make new friends. And I didn't know what my goal was. So at some point I was searching for my goal around age 21. And I couldn't figure out until I went to around the Okard area, around 2005. And I saw this art and it cost $1,000. And I thought that was really expensive. So a friend of mine pointed out to me at the Aging O, and he said that the arts there cost millions of dollars. And I was like, what? Art can cost millions of dollars? He said, yeah. So for a while, I visited the Aging O, and I started seeing all the arts. And my memory went back west to Ghana, where I saw a painter painting my sister's store. And I copied that painting. And so I put it at home somewhere, and my sister found it. And she said, did you paint that? And I said, yes. She said, I shall have let you paint it for me. So that memory, I start buying a dollar store paint and try again. Look through the internet, find pictures of African ideas and start painting them. But I realized that the atmosphere that I'm in is here, Canada. So I had to adapt what my Canada look like, how I'm seeing Canada. So I tend to walk all over the city. So what my imagination look like. The city has lights, buildings, and kind of lights that coming off through my eyes and interacting with the people. So I'm thinking, how can I be a part of the Canadian art scene? Then I just start interpreting my view, which I learned that color makes sense. It's hard to explain because I think color is all all in us. We are all colors. Because we go to clothes stores, we see the color of clothes and we decide, oh, we like this color. It's all in us. So I decide what my color look like. Then I start researching and trying to figure out what my color look like by viewing it so many times in different ways and start connecting myself. I use Photoshop to create different colors and look at them and trying to look at myself and say who I am in the colors, what my taste look like. So then I find my taste and trying to put myself out there. That's how I make my work. But what inspired me is the idea that somebody made art about colors. And I look at it and I feel connect to the colors in the art. And then I try my own to see who I am in myself, trying my own. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really beautiful. The way that you explained your journey, especially with coming to Canada.
I'm missing something, interpreter, please. I'm missing the interpreter.
Oh, so.
You just can't see me. Just give it.
Can you guys
We're
see
good.
it now? Are you okay?
Yep, we're good. We're
Okay, awesome. So thank you. I wanted to point out that, you know, your journey coming here from Ghana and the way that art has inspired you throughout, like, you forming your life in Canada and like how you came here with the vision and the journey of seeing beauty and colors and being inspired by that. I think it's wonderful, and I think we can all admire you for that. I wanted to pass off the question to Clairandean. And maybe you can talk about how, you know, your art practice currently looks like and what are some of the elements that have inspired you.
My art practice is looking like right now. It's including, I take expressive arts therapy, and that's been helping me having more space to just like make something for the sake of making things. I currently am a movement instructor and find I'm holding a lot of space for other people. So in art making, I'm finding thinking about other people. And so when I'm taking expressive arts therapy, it gives me the room just to make art for myself. And I dip in a lot of different mediums. I also work with watercolor. And I've been asked to do watercolor workshops before, and I'm like, no, I think that's just for me. I need something just for me. And my practice is also looking like right now, some type of movement in the morning or the evening, whether that's dancing in front of the mirror, whether that's a little bit of yoga, or whether that's just moving in any kind of way. You're probably going to see me shift a lot because I live with chronic pain. And so I have to move around a lot in order so that my body doesn't lock up. And so what's been inspiring my art now and what's been coming to the forefront is my queer identity and what it means to be Black and living with chronic pain and navigating predominantly white spaces where, you know, where pain is triggered a lot and there's a lot of blind spots, and most of these spaces are not safe for me. And so I have to find ways to not to have armor all the time, but to like, how much time can I give here, and when do I need to leave so I can take care of myself immediately? Allowing myself to have more compassion for myself and my practice, and just letting it change and be different from day to day. So sometimes it's writing in the morning, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's doodling, not even a picture. Sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's talking to a friend. So all those elements and support it's especially in this time in the pandemic where we're so burnt out, and even looking at screens, it's just total burnout. Being able to cultivate compassion for myself to um, not to make art at all when I don't feel like it. And so that's it's shifting every day, but yeah, that's what it's looking like. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah, I think it does, and I think it's lovely how you can talk about how, switching through the different ways in which you do art has worked for you, and how like you still hold that title of being, a strong artist whilst doing all of these other things along your life and in your art life. So I think that's really beautiful, and I like that. Um, I'm gonna like second the question off to like everyone. And the way that you guys can answer it if you want is we can go one by one, the same as what we did this time. And then if you want to do the same order, we can. But if anyone has like something to add on or say, feel free to. So the second question that I have for you guys is, what does Afrofuturism mean to you, and how have you applied your definition of Afrofuturism to your current art practice or practices? And I guess we can start with Alsa since she started last time.
Sure. So I really think that Afrofuturism centers around empowering people of color and telling our stories through art because they have been silenced over time. I think that's the main gist to me. And in my personal artwork, it more leans towards ableism and disability. And for me, growing up, I had severe social anxiety disorder, and I also have borderline personality disorder, which is somewhat demonized in media still to this day. But in my art, I just try to express those feelings visually because they are often overlooked through words. And that is mainly what my art practice looks like. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate that. Evelina, do you want to start and let us know like what Afrofuturism means to you, and like how that definition has applied to your Afrofuturism in your art?
Sure, yeah, hi. Okay, so I wrote a few notes down for myself because otherwise I'll just ramble in various directions forever. So for me, Afrofuturism is vital because it demands, honestly, what is a fairly radical act of imagining a future, because it's kind of a radical act to even imagine having a future right now, low-key, like for like the world, but especially for us. But everything's kind of messed up, climate change, global pandemic, etc. But Afrofuturism demands that we imagine a future, and not only imagine a future, but a future that's actually constructed on our own terms. So for me, I think when it comes to my poetry, a lot of that comes out in terms of how I ask a lot of questions. And especially I try to ask questions that I don't know the answer to yet, because I'm trying to fill in the spaces that haven't been filled in, the parts that we just take for granted. And I'm trying to kind of ask questions of those spaces. And I'm also trying to not only name what's wrong in our world, because that's a big part of my writing, is to bear witness. A lot of it is poetry of witness, lyric poetry, elegy, mourning for what has been lost and what we have suffered, but also to actually try to materially imagine a future. So what would it look like? A world without policing, a world without incarceration, a world without anti-Black racism and white supremacy, a world that has been decolonized. So it's a very difficult process because all we have is the world that is given to us now, the world that we exist in. And that's what we have to build on. We have to build on these materials that aren't necessarily hospitable to justice, but we can use those and then try to imagine them in a different context. So for example, technology is a big part of that for me. How technology is imagined by whiteness versus by Afrofuturism. It's very different. I think we have incredible technology in this world, but it's being operated and owned by individuals and systems who oppress us. We have planned obsolescence. We have, Elon Musk wants to create an underground network of cars that could drive at a super speed on a rail, but instead of investing in public transportation, that would actually be accessible to anyone but the super rich. So I think it's a matter of taking the world into our own hands. And just by creating art, we are kind of saying, there's going to be a future, because otherwise who's going to read this? Who's going to look at this? Who's going to care? Why would this matter? So I think just the act of creation is already part of that, but then to actually try to imagine a better world, like what might a city look like in the future? I would imagine like everyone has access to transportation, everyone has housing, everyone has food. We would have to grow food in a sustainable way. So maybe we're looking at hydroponics. So I actually have a lot of that featured directly in my poetry, because I think that's an important thing, is to actually try to envision a better world. And I think I will always fall short because I live in this world, not in a better world. But if we don't start imagining, we have nothing to work towards, right? So I guess that's a big part of what we have to do as artists, is to try to imagine futures that are centered around Blackness and centered around justice. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I find that like you bringing the Afrofuturism into your writing is something that I know that future generations will admire and will respect, especially like looking at the younger generation we have now and how they are more equipped and more ready to learn. And having you publish your works independently or, by publisher, whichever way that you choose to as a racialized artist, I know that good will come out of it. So thank you for that. Peter, do you want to talk about what Afrofuturism means to you and in the ways that you've applied it to your art practice?
Well, to be honest, I do not think about that. I think more about the dark side of me. Because even in the hearing world, that's what I'm dealing with. Whether it's Black side or white side. So I'm not a part of either way. So that's what I'm dealing with, main on disability and deafness. So I don't really think about the Afro future, what it means to me. So I can't answer that actually.
No, I respect your honesty with that, because especially with the intersectionalities of having a disability and being a person of color, it's hard to, how hold a space for both of them, or like more on one side. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I know I feel automatically include in the word for Black community, I feel automatically include, but the side that they live. So it's like focus on Black and able alone. and leave the disability aside, that pained me a lot. So I kind of trying to figure out how we can come together. I don't know what word for that. It's so difficult.
Yeah, for sure. It is very difficult to see, more of the able-bodied Black community sort of being on the forefront of change and having the disabled community of us marginalized people being left out in these conversations. Also, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it back to something Clairandean was saying, and I think it's important to recognize that even a single person or a single artist, their practice can change and what their work focuses on can change, and that's completely okay because a person is made up of so many different stories in so many different places. And I think it's just really important that as long as we are showing our experiences and bringing attention to them through art, that's the goal.
Thank you for that input. Claire, did you want to add anything onto that?
I feel like in terms of what Afrofuture means, it probably means having those uncomfortable conversations within the Black community about, who's closer to power in the system. Even as a Black person, we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about colorism. We don't talk about, there's a lot of conservatism in Black communities as well. In terms of Afrofuture, I know there's a lot of academia around that that's not accessible to everybody. And I can only speak to Afrofuturism in my current experience, where a lot of Black communities, our past is being actively erased all the time. And so I'm finding myself having to imagine new ways of being in spaces that I can be comfortable in, where I'm nurturing myself. But even just to have that access to imagination is like, what are the tools for, to create a grounding where people can imagine, because of the trauma that we experience in Black communities. It is not the same type of complexity for everyone. Not everyone has access, has the ability to like imagine, because we're so burnt out, we're shot. And so I do feel like allowing ourselves to step back and rest and support each other in how to rest and how to heal, it allows space to begin to at least reflect, or even asking a lot of questions to reflect about how do you access imagination, to imagine what are we talking about? And so what's accessible language and theory and academia for one person isn't for another person. What are we talking about? And I think, going back to what Peter's saying, colors, like me and colors, if you speak to me in color, I'm getting it, rather than, so another way to look at that is like, I'm doing a lot of writing right now. I'm doing online trainings. For me to sit in that and still process that information, I have to make everything visual, and it's got to be colorful for me to absorb it, or else it's not working. And this is seen as something in the classroom in education is, something, you got to sit this way. Your body's policed in a classroom. You have to sit here, sit still, do nothing, kind of thing. And it's a tricky question, because we're living Afrofuture right now, and there's so much pain and suffering right now because we see the old world deteriorating already, and there's so much security in that, but it's already breaking up. So we're having to think new while also being very exhausted, while also being, feeling kind of impatient and frustrated. So the question is, how do we create, circles of care for each other where we can exercise compassion and, reaching out so we can start merging and bridging. And I just want to go back to someone said here, Daniel Cole, I think bridging the space for Black disabled people in the future is an Afrofuturist outlook, even if not part of your work per se. And I just wanted to highlight that someone, yeah. I hope that's answering. And Jocelyn said, agree, a queer disabled Black future is what I'm working towards. So it's happening. And I think, this is a hard conversation. I want to say that it's a hard conversation. I don't think we come out with like the answer. There's going to be more questions, and it's like, how do we stay in conversation? How do we stay present with each other while things are shifting so quickly? And when do we get to rest as well? I'm finished.
Yeah, I agree. Like once we start, like, it's like an onion. Like once we start peeling off a layer, like there's more in the middle. Like there's more that you have to keep going and unpacking, unraveling. There's more trauma that we're uncovering and we're seeing. And especially within our own communities, it's like, of course we're fighting white supremacy and we're fighting the institutions that have put us in these uncomfortable and terrible situations, but then we're fighting within the community as to what justice really means, and like how do we go about it, and how do we honor and respect ourselves as we're going about it, especially when you spend your life dedicating to changing things. It's like when do we rest, when do we take a breath, and when do we start looking at the other things that are being cried out to in our community and put them on the forefront as well. So I think those are really good points that everyone had. Sorry. And that actually kind of leads into the other question of like, what does disability justice mean to you? And, what role, if any, has it played like in your life? Because we've talked about Afrofuturism, but now it's like, what does the disability justice mean in that sense to, your life and with your art? I don't know if you want to go around in the same area or anyone wants to jump in.
Sure. Well, I personally have been talking about in my classes how a bunch of disabilities and the labels associated with them were initially created just for clinical reasons, and somewhere along the way those things turned into weaknesses or insults. And I think it's really important for us moving forward to try to get back to a place where different disabilities aren't looked at as flaws in people, and just the different experiences that we all live with, because they're not things that you can just get rid of, and they shouldn't be looked down upon.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that. So are you like, just to reiterate, it's like the language that it's used when talking about disabled individuals, or talking about people who have any sort of neurodivergence or physical ailments or anything like that, there's more of the insult factor nowadays than there has been before, when it first came about by diagnosing people and such. Is that kind of what I got from it?
Oh, I mean, for example, when mental health became more popularized in the medical world, mental retardation was just a clinical term to describe people's symptoms and what they were going through, but over time, society kind of changed that, and just because they were othered and those people had a different experience than neurotypical people, we started seeing it as a flaw, and we use it to put down people instead of what we should be doing, which is using that knowledge to make the world more inclusive and make sure that everyone has the same access to resources as everyone and can experience everything fully, no matter what disability they have.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for breaking that down for us. Evelina, did you want to talk about what disability justice means to you and kind of compare and talk about like how it relates?
Sure, yeah. Okay. I guess for me, disability justice would mean a world where disability and disabled people are not treated as an afterthought or like an inconvenience. Because we need to create a world where our needs are met to the extent that our social conditions aren't harming us. So like in Hamilton, for example, like they won't shovel the sidewalks in the winter. Like that's the job of individual citizens. And obviously that results in a city that's completely impassable for anyone using an assistive device, for anyone who has any like mobility, who struggles at all with mobility issues. Like anyone who's got a physical disability basically is going to have a harder time moving around the city in the winter. So I think disability justice would look like a world that is actually designed with disability at the forefront, not as like an afterthought. So like sidewalks would be shoveled, we'd have robust public transit, assistive devices and medications would be free because right now those aren't. We'd have free housing, free food, everyone would have enough to afford what they need to live comfortably. Our architecture and our social planning would put disability first instead of, again, like as an afterthought. We wouldn't be building inaccessible buildings that then need to be altered to become relatively accessible. Doorways would be wide enough. Everywhere would have a ramp. Like basically, I think like right now, nothing, like our whole society is like actively trying to kill or passively trying to kill disabled people. Like right now we have the government pushing through Bill C7 and trying to expand medical assistance in dying to disabled people and or mentally ill people. But at a time when our society is organized to make disabled people suffer, offering suicide, essentially offering assisted suicide to people without first offering food and shelter and economic stability and adequate access to home care or yeah, the coverage for like assisted devices and medications and therapies. Basically, yeah, like we need to create a world that does not seek to eradicate disability, which we have right now. I mean, all of our technology, instead of being used to make disabled people's lives easier, is essentially just used to maintain a system that harms disabled people. So for example, if you look at like most of the funding for autism research is into finding the autism gene so that they can then eradicate autistic children and prevent them from ever being born. Now, like, and I'm autistic, so obviously that upsets me. That's the kind of thing where it's like, instead of it being used by the oppressors, we need to actually be using these technologies and organizing things around, yeah, around disability justice, around making the world actually for disabled people instead of against, really, because the whole world is designed against the mobility and freedom and autonomy of any disabled person.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying about how disabled justice is essentially just an afterthought on almost every infrastructure decision or institutional decision, like getting accommodations for like schooling or your workplace or anything is extremely hard to get. Just being able to just exist in spaces has always been difficult for the disability community. And it's interesting that there's so much non-visible disabilities that we have, and then there's so many visible disabilities that we have, that it isn't something that is thought of first when it comes to everything in our lives. Like we probably make up more than, an able-bodied population, but it's interesting, and thank you for mentioning those good points. Peter, do you have what are your thoughts on disability justice, and like what does that mean to you? I know you talked a little bit about it. Go further.
I agree with just the first two comments. For me, simple society is designed for people who hear us and have able bodies. This disability is not looked at, not think they are part of, or not think we are capable of. Whatever ability we have, I think something that we need to be showing. And the reason for maybe even able people can be give birth to children with disability. So, but they don't make place for us. Simple, I agree with the first two comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's for me, it's in my emotion take over me. Yeah. As I tell you what I'm thinking, I'm making my art for because they think they are better at everything. And also because we're not a part of the system. What I'm thinking is they consume everything. They consume the land, they consume money, they consume every resources they find. And they push us aside. It means that we can't develop. We haven't been developing. Science, they've been developing. So it's not equal. How do they know what we're capable of? They can't know until we develop in the same equal ways. So that's what I think of. That's what I think it means for me.
Thank you. You made good points with, the demand for it to be equal. And it's like able-bodied individuals and neurotypicals and, into terms of like even white neurotypicals and white people who run these institutions, they not only put pressure to make us think that we don't belong in these spaces because of racial identities, it's we don't belong in these spaces because we're disabled as well. And, it's like a double hindrance to something that holds no grounds of evidence and holds no real grounds of truth, because we have been making art and living and being smart and doing all the things that they've said that we aren't capable of doing. We have been doing it, and it's just a matter of time for when institutions will start to change to see that we are capable of so much stuff. So thank you, Peter. Clairandean, did you want to jump in on what disability justice means to you?
Yeah. What's been previously said, yes. And kind of like Peter, where the emotion kind of takes over. Because then it goes back to accessing imagination, dealing with the system that's currently here and wants to insist in being here. And then it's like, spaces like these where we can hear each other and tell our stories, I think is part of that justice, and just continue to stand up for each other, as well as advocating and creating spaces where, everybody's served. I'm still learning a lot about ableism and what that means, and it's very new to me, but I'm also accepting my neurodivergence and what's that looking like and feeling like since the pandemic hit and all the shit I don't have to deal with anymore. I was like, oh, I see what was happening. And so it's like a lot of armor coming down and allowing so I'm really excited about learning the things I'm learning right now, and it's because I can do it in my way. I can do it from bed. It's not because I'm lazy, it's because a chair is too hard and I can't concentrate when my body's giving me the signal, like things like that. And then it's like, I think you were mentioning about fighting white supremacy, but it also, what does healing from white supremacy look like for us as well? And healing from that in order to imagine new spaces as well, where everyone's served in a different type of way. The one thing I keep going back to, because I'm doing a learning in trauma-informed frameworks and things like that, I'm realizing so much of what I've been expected and how to be in a classroom was really just like silencing my body signals and kind of just like shut me down. And so when I went into training with Good Body Feel here in Hamilton, and to have access to my body and my body signals again, and what it needs to do in order for my nervous system to feel calm so that it can do work as well. It makes me think of like how much of the system that's created, and a weaponized system at that, how much that creates, so much barrier to even having access to imagination, and like, how do we stand up for each other? Who gets pushed at the forefront? Who gets seen all the time? Who is visible? So justice looks like what we're doing right now and beyond, and continue, and allowing those nuances, allowing feedback, continuing to educate each other and create communities where we can listen. Yeah.
Yeah, creating those spaces to be able to lean on each other and hear each other, and respect the trauma that we've all been through on different levels is something that is needed and is really important. I wanted to, since we're kind of on the ball rolling on sort of combating white supremacy and the ways in which that aligns to these institutions that are sort of blocking us from being a part of it full-heartedly and in entirety. What do you think needs to be done in order to combat these like white supremacist, ableist institutions, especially within the art institutions?
I think I just want to point out the chat that's been going on where everyone's typing, and they brought up how many diagnoses in the first place were made to other people. And I think that's really important to highlight, and that's also important to move forward and combat white supremacy, is to have more people in those places of power who are people of color or who actually do have disabilities, who are experiencing the world in a different way from the people who have been putting all these policies into place. Because it is true that a lot of diagnoses were created by people who did not experience those things. And I don't think that is a very fair approach.
Thanks for pointing out the chat, especially with, I don't know, I wasn't really reading too much of it, but as I'm reading it now, I see that there's a lot to do with sort of the inequality when it comes with diagnoses, and the inequality comes with, centering disability education and centering representation in these institutions that we have. So I think that's really important that you highlighted that. Thank you a lot. Evelyna, what do you think needs to be done, I guess, in order to combat ableism, white supremacy? Like, obviously not like with the entire solution, because like this is just a conversation and we're not going to fix it all, but like brainstorming, like what would you think would need to be done?
In terms of racism and anti-Blackness specifically, or are we talking ableism? Like, what? Because I know the question. I'm sorry. So being autistic, I kind of wrote like my answers out to the specific questions a little bit in advance, and now I'm like, because the questions were asked a little differently. Now I'm a little thrown off. That's all.
Oh no, sorry. I can voice it exactly how I think it was wrote when I sent it, but what do you think needs to be done in order to combat white supremacy and ableism in these art institutions?
Okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, for me being like the light skin, being ambiguous looking, I'm not experiencing the same level of anti-Blackness that most Black people are experiencing in these institutions. So I think like, first of all, there just need to be like, but first of all, I think there need to actually be Black people and disabled people like in positions where they can actually give opportunities to other people, because right now it's always like, and I don't think it's enough to do that, because then you can just end up replacing your oppressor with another oppressor. But I think like at this point, like if you look at Hamilton, and this isn't just in the arts, this is just like everything in Hamilton. But okay, so for example, my mom is an environmentalist. She's an activist. She's Black. She's been doing like stuff in Hamilton through Environment Hamilton for like over a decade. She can't really get like hired for any jobs. Like she has been applying for city jobs that she is well overqualified for this entire time and has literally never gotten even like an interview, I think, for most of them. And meanwhile, like, they'll be hiring like white people even for stuff that's specifically supposed to be dealing with racial justice. Like, so, like Sobe Bikes, right? So they've started an initiative like Everyone Rides that's supposed to be providing cyclists, like Black cyclists specifically, opportunities to access bikes. And that is run by white people. And the very first thing that they put out was a post on their Instagram that featured an image of a non-Black member of our community who's actually a friend of ours. And it was specifically for a Black empowerment initiative and a Black initiative. And they didn't even have a picture of a Black person to use. They'd taken photos from the previous year. We reached out to them. We reached out to the person whose photo was used. It got taken down. But the fact is, like, you've got white people running this, using like, and it's a thing that's meant to be centering Black people. And it's not even like, they don't even use a photo of an actual Black person. They use a photo of like of a non-Black person of color, thinking, I guess, close enough or something. And they fixed that when corrected, but that shouldn't have had to happen, because this shouldn't be something that's specifically for Black people, shouldn't have been run by white people to begin with. So that's the kind of thing that I think happens a lot in the arts too. That's just the most recent example in Hamilton I can think of in my own life, but that's something that happens a lot, is that you have like people, who are supposed to increase diversity. So maybe they're saying this issue, everyone's going to be Black for this literary magazine, but they're going to still gatekeep what they consider to be a valid representation of Blackness in literature. They're still going to decide like what poems, what stories, what pieces of art deserve to be there. And they're going to still do that through a white supremacist lens, intentionally or otherwise. And I even see that with like, okay, so like even with my mentor for my thesis, she's like a wonderful, wonderful person. She's white though, and she's really lovely. But at one point I'd written a poem about a protest that happened in Hamilton in response to the murder of George Floyd. And also there were a few other people that we were talking about, but it was right after that. And she wanted me to change some of the lines because first of all, like I mentioned medications I was taking for anxiety, which was being caused by this, like by these situations. And first of all, she's like, well, take that out because it makes you seem like an unreliable narrator to be mentally ill, basically, as if that's like, or to be affected emotionally by this to the point of then having to personally then medicate because there is no societal solution that will heal me in this moment. I have to like survive, so therefore I medicate. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing is she wanted me to change one of the lines from like we say to we sing. And it's like, we weren't singing. This wasn't a happy moment. We weren't singing together. We were all feeling pretty shitty. And it was kind of like, that's not you have an idea of what a protest should be, what Blackness should be and what this activism should look like. And you're now imposing that and of and of respectability, whose voice is worth listening to. And so like, I had to challenge her on that, and then she understood and she was cool about it. But that's the kind of thing where it's like, those people are also the people deciding what goes into, what gets published, what submissions are accepted, like what art gets put up, you know? So I think that's a problem. And that went way off topic, but yeah.
I think it's still on topic.
Yeah.
It's still on topic.
Also, what did you wanted to add something?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to add directly to that. I have a few friends who are currently in the University of Toronto Masters of Social Work program, and one of them brought to my attention that there's a course specifically for how to work to combat the inequalities for Indigenous people. And the professor for that class was a white woman, and it's just interesting that they couldn't find a single Indigenous person to run that course. And it's also, they brought up that for that program and the Ontario social workers community in general. In your applications, it's frowned upon if you mention your own struggles with mental health or disability, because they do look down on you and look at you as if that's like, that could be a liability and you won't be good at your job because you do have a disability. And it's baffling because you would think that they would want people who directly understand to be teaching the next generation about how to get rid of the inequalities.
Yeah, like the gatekeeping in places that are supposedly diverse and inclusive is almost at a level, like it's kind of disgusting, to be quite honest, because it's like, here, I'm going to give you this platform or this ability to express your needs and what you want, but I'm not going to let you do it. And it's interesting how that can be done with such ease. And it's like, it's one of those things when you were mentioning with U of T, it's like, it's not even shocking that that's what happened. It's expected it's expected to happen when you're in spaces like that. So thanks for bringing that up. Peter, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Or, your thoughts on white supremacy and ableism in these art institutions?
Well, I think that is a very deep thing to crack. I feel they have built deep structure, which is very hard to crack. What that is they have the media, they have the platforms, they can reach almost all the people. So I think we need the ability to reach people and show them who we are and what we do but constantly we are hiding. We try to find a way to show. It's almost impossible. There's no place. So I think that allowed them to claim what is great or whatever they want to say to the people, so that our voices will not be heard. That's the point, I think. We need our voices to come out constantly. Because when they go on whatever media they have, they may not say anything about us. Or they may start speaking about us, for us. But that's not how we want to be known for. So we have to be there by ourselves and speak about who we are. I think that's the way to combat that.
I agree. I find that, you know, it's the silencing is something that they love to do. And just the whole process of silencing is so ridiculous, because you have these spaces and they know that they control everything, and they know that whatever they say or approve of or allow will get through to the public and will get through to people who will then take that on as information and fact. So they know the damaging causes of silencing people of color and disabled people of color, and yet they still do that with pride. So I feel like, yeah, just deplatforming them and sort of explaining that like this isn't okay and ways of action is something that could be done in the future, or like now I guess it's happening all the time lately, but just more of it is something that we need. Clairandean, did you want to talk about yeah, like what your thoughts are in terms of white supremacy and ableism in these art institutions?
Yeah. Even like what Peter was saying about telling your own stories, I think that's essential, is very important, to be able to be in spaces like these, tell your own story, hear your voice heard, and also, you know, um, I get so angry and emotional about this stuff that it takes me a second to like ground. But um, I feel like there's a few things like acknowledging that we are beginning to dismantle white supremacy. There's a long way to go, a long way to go, but acknowledging that we're doing it. I think it's easy to say we're not doing it when we're in the midst of it, because that's the way we've been taught to think about our actions. Um, and it's it's a method of silencing. It's like, your actions don't have any power, forget about it, no one's listening. We're listening, we're here trying to take it in, educating each other, and also um, trying to understand each other better, and how to you know fight and heal from white supremacy together, and understanding that it's not a solo process, it takes everybody to hop in. The other thing I was thinking about too is, like, as you're doing this work, is understanding, how do you care for yourself within this work? It's exhausting, it's frustrating, it brings up all types of emotions. How do we balance those other feelings as well? Where do we get relief? When do we get to access something fun, something pleasurable? Because you can go on this road and it can look all dark, and it's not all dark. And at the same time, calling calling out white supremacy when it happens. Like a white person who's saying they're doing anti-oppressive frameworks or teaching that and doesn't have a co-facilitator of a person of color even who's experiencing that directly, that's not anti-oppressive at all. And so it's looking to things like that and becoming more aware when someone says, or when an organization is presenting or a university is presenting is like as diverse and anti-oppressive, and this is what we're doing. And it's like, are they talking explicitly and specifically about what they're offering to Black communities, and how are they doing that, and what is their track record? Who's showing up, or are they using stock images that they found on the internet? So it's like keeping aware of those types of things, and kind of just being in the know and continue to share information. Again, they're just always trying to silence, and um, we are shown in extreme ways, like George Floyd, is like they want to silence you actively. So giving ourselves spaces to also grieve those things when they happen so we can process and get back in the work. And also don't forget to play as well. That's part of the healing as well that needs to be in there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree a lot with, the ways in which we've been silenced, or the ways in which they're attempting to silence us. And I find that, nowadays we're becoming way more aware, not to say that we haven't always been aware of, the roles of which white supremacy has played in these institutions, but now we're figuring out the ways to combat it and figuring out ways where we can move around it. And we don't need to lean on them for support. We don't need to lean on white institutions and art institutions to show us our voices or to allow us to be heard. Like, we can find other avenues of doing that. So I think it's really important to remember the change that we can accomplish with or without leaning on these white supremacy institutions. I think it's good to go into the last question, since we're kind of only 10 minutes, even though I really like talking to everyone. And it's, how can Black disabled artists be better supported, and what needs to change in order for us to thrive? So I feel like this is like a good question, because then we can all discuss and brainstorm, like, we all cognitively know like what we need to do to support other people, but it's nice to hear like from artists as to how we can support them in their journeys and in their work and in their lives, and within the Black community and in like the general community, population, art world, all that stuff. So
If
also,
we're going in the same order, I guess I'll start again. But as I was saying in the beginning of our discussion, I recently came across a few organizations that provided funding for Black artists. And I don't know if anyone's heard of Workman Arts, which is another organization that has studio spaces and classes for artists with disabilities and POC artists. And I think that one way that we can improve is just having more of those resources, because it's often overlooked that finances can really get in the way for some people if they want to pursue the arts. And just having discussions like these, honestly, to raise awareness about all of those resources, because there are a lot of them that I did not know about until I started talking to other people and realized that other people were experiencing the same things as me and having a lot of like hurdles that they had to get over that other people didn't.
Yeah, thank you. Evelina, did you want to jump in to answer that as well?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so sorry, what was the question again? It was how to how
How can
supported?
Black disabled artists be better supported?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, like, yeah, like obviously we need, like, you know, hire Black disabled people, like pay artists enough to live, you know, because that's not a thing. But ultimately, I think that the problem starts way before we get to the point of being artists, because like, and I think Peter, you might have talked about this a little bit already, but just the idea like of, you know, not being able, not even knowing that you are an artist, not even knowing that you can be an artist, because you don't have the tools available to you to create the kind of art that you would be good at, that you'd be talented at. I think that's like, you know, for me as a writer, it's a little bit simpler in that technically all the material I need is like a pen and a pencil and a piece of paper. But for visual artists, materials are expensive. For musical artists, especially, materials are incredibly expensive. I just think how many incredible violinists, for example, will never exist because they didn't even know that they could play violin, because they never touched a violin, because they didn't have an opportunity to take lessons, because those are expensive, because the instrument is expensive. Like, for example, my little sister is a violinist, right? And that was something like she went to U of T for violin and performance, and I think she was one of only like 8 Black students there, and she was obviously also lighter skinned and also like benefiting from that. But there were literally almost no Black students in this elite program. It was almost entirely white and some East Asian students. And that speaks to all the years before, not just that, it's not just at admissions, it's not just that U of T, for example, needs to open up its policy to create affirmative action. It's all those years before that kids never got to play stringed instruments. They never got to learn classical music. They never got to like study any of these things that cost money, to know that they were good at it, to know that they wanted to pursue it, to know that it was an option. So it needs to start way sooner. Like my parents, to let us play music, that was a big thing. Like that was a huge sacrifice that I am so grateful to them for, because they didn't own a car. We lived in city housing. We didn't ever go on vacations. Like we had to save everything so that we could afford lessons. And even then, like I had to quit violin because when I was that age, well, Maddie kept going because there was only enough for one of us to play at the time, and also do piano, which is what I was more passionate about. And then our piano teacher, who is this like older white woman, she actually gave us a huge discount so all 3 of us could keep playing, because Maddie was going to have to quit playing piano and I was going to have to quit playing violin. And so that way she was still able to play piano, and that was actually necessary for her to then do her music program. She needed to play at a certain level on another instrument. So all of that wouldn't have been possible without the money to do it. And that came out of a lot of sacrifice from my parents, but some people would never have had that option at all. So I think if we're talking about making the arts accessible to disabled students, to disabled people, to Black people, to Black disabled people, then it has to start with making our whole world accessible and making our whole world just, because, which I know sounds super overwhelming, I'm sorry, but in terms of like, okay, most artists aren't making it on their art alone, so we need living wages for everyone, because a lot of artists are out there working minimum wage and barely keeping a roof over their head and don't have time to do their art. We need, like, every young person needs to have access to opportunities to play music, and that has to be free, that has to be subsidized, because otherwise they won't get that chance. Everyone has to have the opportunities to actually explore art, or the only artists we end up with are the ones who had the privilege to even know that they could be artists. And that we've already lost so many brilliant artists by that point. So that's the problem, I think.
Thank you so much. I wanted to go like more further into that with like agreeing with how hard it is to find yourself in the art world when you are, marginalized, disabled, income wise. Like it's really difficult to really be offered a space to actually let yourself thrive within art. And that's why a lot of the times like it is very limiting and very like white centric places of like music schools and stuff like that, because it's costly and it's expensive and it's hard. And I think like, you know, as also was saying earlier, that there are like small little things that people can like do to band together and like have art be accessible to everyone and have art be something that isn't gatekept by rich people. And, you know, a lot of the times it seems that art is something you earn the right to do, but really it's something that everyone should be able to do. And yeah, I feel like complete agreement with that. Um, Peter, do you want to talk about how Black disabled artists could be better supported?
Like everybody, yes, what everybody just said, agree. It's money and space. That's one key I struggle with. Yeah, I think that's it for me. It's just money and space. I mean, all my work right now is on my computer. It's just on my computer. But I want to see them outside so people can see and possible buy. Like in the beginning I said, this my friend said, at AGO, people buy art millions of dollars. I mean, I worked hard for years and I made my work as magical as what you will see in AGO. Spend, the people buy it like 100,000 is like magic money. I mean, deaf and disability, we all need those kind of money to live. We all need some of those money. We are constantly under the water and we can't feel like we want to rest. We can't feel like that. I mean, when will we ever feel like that? Something got to give. I just don't know what to say. It's just painful. I guess I can't even say a word.
Thank you. It is really hard to, you know, have these conversations, especially when like the solution is right in front of our faces. And it's like, how do we get other people to actually care enough to actually do these changes that we are demanding and that we can see and we know it's possible and feasible. We know it's not too costly. We know it's not going to kill the economy. We know that, you know, it's not going to deprive anyone else of all the other luxuries they can have. So it's hard when we sit here and have the door constantly closed in your face when like you see the possibilities of it all and you've seen that like, you know, throughout history it's just always been off the backs of Black and racialized individuals who have thrived in the art world and have thrived in these spaces that they so willingly want to keep us out of. So yeah, like the pain is there, and I appreciate you for saying the words that you could say and, you know, acknowledging the pain and the frustration of it all. Clairandean, do you have anything to add or any notes?
I'm not even sure because I'm feeling the pain and I get it. I honestly do not know because, you know, people have been saying, we've been talking. I'm kind of without, like you said, like the solution is in our face and we're looking at it. And maybe that's not the solution. I'm not really sure, but what in my experience, it's like it takes that one person like, hey, I have some extra space here. And that doesn't happen for everybody. It doesn't happen all the time. But I think there's still something, and there's power in, again, sharing your stories, your individual stories, and continue to be loud about that. For me personally, there's nothing gonna stop me from creating art. So if I can't do it with paint, I'm gonna do it with the positioning of something else. And I just feel like that's just in my blood. Like nothing will stop me. And so I guess in my personal walk, because nothing will stop me, I just hope to inspire others, like whatever your circumstances is, you can create art right there.
Yeah, I agree a lot with everything that you've all said, and I wanted to thank you on behalf of myself and on behalf of DJ Nov to be hearing like your voices and seeing your faces and knowing that like the future, it's like right in front of our eyes and we're looking at it. And you know, it's beautiful to see the resilience that you guys all have and the resilience that you show within your art and the way that you advocate for your change and in the way that you advocate for your livelihoods. And I honor and respect that full-heartedly. And like, if you guys want to, you know, send social medias so you can like broadcast it, give you guys clout, or, you know, just like anything that we could do to help out within your art journeys, that would be something we're all willing to do. And you know, the beautiful thing about art is that it's beautiful and that it's filled with joy and it's filled with love and it's filled with community. And I think the best thing that we can all do is really harness that joy and hold that to us as we go on and fight for what we need and fight for our futures. And I think as long as we hold community and we hold the joy that we have for one another, we'll, you know, it's possible to have a good future and we'll make it through. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone. And throughout March and April, we'll also have other events, so please stay tuned in part of our Black Disabled Futures campaign. And you'll be able to find that information on our website and social media. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Christopher, our ASL interpreter. And thank you all for joining us here today. Black Disabled Lives Matter. Have a good night.
Bye.